Yo, Doug, how's it going?
What's up? Happy Friday, everybody. Nice to see you, Pete.
Oh,
Been a while.
likewise. You're looking dapper as usual. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm super pumped on our guest today, Doug Landis. A little bit more about Doug here in a second, but we're just going to let folks kind of trickle in here. So, Doug, any big plans for this weekend? What'd you do for the 4th?
We moved down to LA
Yep.
just 2 years ago, right in the middle of COVID or right in the beginning of COVID. And we're living in the Palisades, and apparently it's like this small little neighborhood. They have a 4th of July parade right on Sunset. It's like 5-minute walk from our house. Jennifer Gardner was like the grand marshal or wherever. And,
Naturally.
This whole, but like celebrities just walking around, like you're like, oh, hey, what's up? Your kids are cute. Just kind of normal everyday people. It's fun. All my neighbors have kids, and they were all on the parade, so it was great to just kind of hang out. And there's a huge fireworks show afterward. It's cool.
Oh, that's fantastic. What and have you been getting in the water? What's your favorite break around Pacific Palisades? Have you been getting in the water much? Because I know that you're a Santa Cruz guy normally, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but we sold our Santa Cruz house when we moved down here because we just figured we're never going to use it. But so Sunset Beach is literally 10 minutes door to door from my house, and then you go north to Topanga, and then north just a little bit further north to Malibu.
Nice, I love it. Yeah. Excellent. You gonna get in the water this weekend, or
I'm gonna be on the golf course? I'm gonna try and get in the water tomorrow. I'm definitely gonna be on the golf course. My wife is gone. My wife's gone for the weekend, and so I'm gonna squeeze as much as I can in the weekend. So I'll definitely surf. But I've got some. She also left me a honey-do list. So I've got some things to do around the house.
Clean the pipeline, update your close dates. All the.
I do have some work to do. Yeah. So I will be.
All that sort of stuff. I love it. Okay, excellent. Well, let's go ahead and get this party started here. I'm super pumped that we've got Doug here today. So folks, just to help everyone kind of get familiar with kind of the Zoom interface, Power Hour is one of the big things about Power Hours. We try to keep it as interactive as possible. There are a bunch of questions that have been submitted ahead of time for Doug and I to chop it up on, but please do kind of use the chat, use the Q&A panel as well. For folks who are not familiar, Power Hour is hosted by. Yeah. Do you like how it's like the colors? It's like a gradient.
Yeah, totally is.
One of our marketers. Yeah, one of our marketers, Hannah, did that. I don't know how long it took her, but it looks like $1 million, so it's worth it. But yeah, for those who are not familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, related disciplines. And the community's mission is pretty straightforward. It's to create an environment for our 30,000 and growing members to answer questions that they struggle to solve on their own, help them see around corners they may not know about, just like get smarter, get better what they do. And so the way that we do that, of course, is through great live sessions like this one right here. We have a robust online forum as well that's great for questions, asynchronous questions and answers, and in-person events as well. Which actually we have our first MSP Modern Sales Salon, like roundtable salon in San Francisco next Thursday for the first time in like a hot second, which is
totally first one. You've had many of them. It's just first one in a couple of years, right?
Yeah, first one in a couple of years. Yeah, precisely. So it's going to be super sick. It's actually part of our Revenue Excellence Summit that we have coming up next week, which is pretty rad as well. The speakers that we have there is bananas. We've got Kyle Porter from Sales Loft. I know, a former Emergence Capital portfolio company. We've got Kelly Wright, the COO and president of Gong. We've got Henry Shook, the CEO of Zoom Info. We've got Anna Baird, the CRO of Outreach. So we got some cool folks that are going to be chopping it up. It's going to be super fantastic. We got a bunch of amazing sales nerds. So
love it.
Yeah. So just a couple housekeeping items here. This is rapid fire Q&A. You're here to learn, so please do ask your questions. Nothing is too tactical here because you got some pretty tactical thinkers here, which is great. So let's go ahead and head into the introductions here. I'll make mine really quick because Doug's more interesting than me. My name's Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that exists to help sales managers, so AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers, use metrics to be better managers, to help their teams improve performance, to help their reps improve performance. I'm also the co-founder of Modern Sales Pros. But enough about me. Doug, you want to give folks a little bit of your background? You've been around the block at Salesforce, Box, and now Emergence. Maybe you can tell folks a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Emergence as well.
Yeah, of course. And Pete, this is super fun because it's been a while.
It is fun.
For those of you who don't know, actually, I was at the very first MSP event, right? Wasn't that?
Sounds about right.
It was at the OpenViews conference room in San Francisco. Or there's like 20 of us around a table. I was like, who is this Pete guy?
It's fun stuff.
Who's this engineer / turned sales professional? It's pretty wild, which just goes, we're dating ourselves now because this is, what is this, like 5 years ago?
I was like 15 years ago. It's just, time flies. I had hair. Yours was your hair was brown. I had hair, etc.
There you go.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, what's up, everybody? I'm Doug Landis. I'm a growth partner at Emergence Capital. Emergence is an early stage venture firm. We are hyper focused on helping Series A and B stage B2B enterprise SaaS companies scale and grow to become the iconic beasts that we hope they can be. I am a sales professional wrapped in a marketer's body that cares more about customer success than most revenue leaders, because I think customer success is a secret weapon. Yes. That's kind of like my mantra.
I love that. I'm this man, bear, pig, unicorn, purple squirrel thing. Revenue man, bear, pig. Yeah, amazing.
Revenue man, bear, pig. I love that.
It's so good.
Oh man, it's so good. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and then I think at Box you worked on sales productivity, sales excellence, a little bit of product marketing, I want to say, and then at Salesforce you did enablement and productivity as well. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, you're remembering all of that correctly. So I started off in sales, carried a bag long time ago. I started in sales, back when I was a kid selling newspapers on my paper route. But yeah,
I love that.
Professionally, out of college, I went and worked for Black & Decker, selling power tools and accessories, right? Like,
really?
Arguably, oh yeah, totally. I worked construction growing up, and so like I love building. It's also why I love startups, because I love building, and you get to see kind of the fruits of your labor. Once it gets to be done and really big, I'm kind of like, I'm bored. Okay, time to move on. Which is why it's been so great being in the venture business, because we're constantly seeing new companies, especially early stage ones. Once a company gets big, like SalesLoft, and gets acquired for $2+ billion, we kind of pull out and get back to the early days. Yeah.
I'm actually going to be in Atlanta in 2 weeks, and I'm taking out a bunch of SalesLoft sales leadership, because they're longtime Atrium customers. I won't be able to see Kyle because he's going to be down in Florida. But yes, like they're a fantastic Emergence Capital portfolio company. Who else? Oh, Chorus. Chorus is an Emergence portfolio company. There might be a Chorus bot on this call. I'm not sure. Like, it just follows me around and like joins all my calls and what have you. Yeah, it's just helpful. It's just like, oh man, I forgot about XYZ. Yeah. Lots of revenue tech. And Guru. Thanks, Dalton. Oh, Dalton's here. Guru. Hey, what's up, Dalton?
What's up, Dalton?
Oh, sweet. Yeah, Guru.
Zoom, right? Like we were the first investors in Zoom.
Wait, what? I've never. What?
Yeah, I don't know.
I've never heard of Zoom.
Funny. It's this weird name. It's like saying it's all about happiness, and I don't know. It seems to work pretty well.
Yeah.
Crunchbase is another one of ours. At least kind of that go-to-market tech stack.
Yep. Yeah. Excellent. Killer. Well, I think we can get jamming here. Thanks for joining us, Doug. We have a bunch of questions that were submitted ahead of time. We have some folks that, and again, like I was saying, folks, like, please do like ask your own questions. I think one of the things that we could start with first is, because I think like what's really top of mind for a lot of for a lot of sales leaders, founders, et cetera, is like, this potential incipient economic blah, 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 like wobbliness, et cetera. Some people are seeing, modifications of their, kind of their business realities. Other people are not seeing anything at all. Obviously, you guys, have dozens and dozens of folks in your portfolio. So, maybe there's some kind of things that you'd like to kind of opine on there. My 5-year-old just ran in. That's why the door opened. There's here, I'm going to turn on digital background in case he like decides to take all his clothes off and like run around in the background. It'll be amazing.
I mean, who doesn't? I mean,
I know.
Are you kidding me? That's how I operate. That's how I run around my house.
Exactly.
You don't need that visual at all, but it's interesting. We talk about like as this impending wobbliness. Dude, we're here. We're in it. Like it's no joke. We've been talking about like this, kind of impending, economic downturn. It's happening. And the reality is right now, I mean, we're having conversations every single week about what can we do to continue to help our companies or early stage companies think through how to navigate this. Look, when you invest early on in Series A and B, we're investing for the long run. So we're not panicking, but we're trying to help our companies be smart about making some pretty strategic decisions right now. In particular, got to make sure you have 24 months of cash in the bank, because we just don't want to go out and have to try and raise right now because the cost of capital is so much higher, right? So it's like our companies are not going to raise valuations that we think are conducive to what they're, to the market. Well, it's probably conducive to the market, but not to what we want as continuing rounds. And so, capital is important. Keeping your burn in check is really important. Being really, really maniacal about churn. You cannot afford to lose a single customer right now. Being super maniacal about pipeline. So these are like the kind of the core ethos of, how to build and scale a business. We're kind of asking and suggesting our companies to really dig in and double down. Many of our companies have had to make cuts, some relatively significant, but then we also have some other companies, and this may be true for some of the folks on the call, but if you sell into there are several recession-proof industries out there. And we have some companies that actually sell into those, or they operate in those industries. Insurance, healthcare, security. Those are industries that they're always growing. They never seem to go down, even if the economy starts to kind of shit the bed. So, if you have, even to our portfolio companies, if you have customers in those segments, go do some more diligence.
Upsell them. Go get them.
How did you do it? Who did you sell to? What was the messaging? And can you repeat that?
Do it more.
Or because what's happening is some of your other industries that you've been selling into might slow down pretty significantly, or might just go away altogether, right? So really being thoughtful about segmentation and maybe even resegmenting, maybe being more thoughtful about who your target profile is, or your target market is. That we're seeing some shifts in some of our portfolio companies as well. So, it's like getting a maniacal and really kind of more detail oriented in the data.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of kind of cool things there I want to index off of. One is, I think, this notion of like pivoting, right? Or like, it's not, sorry, pivot is actually a proprietary like startup word. So I don't want to, it's essentially just like just tuning your messaging, right? Or tuning your GTM. And like, you and I are, we're like product marketer, kind of like, or erstwhile product marketers, like, under the covers, right? Like you were saying, a sales leader wrapped in a marketer's body. I think that's something that a lot of organizations, like with just like a little bit of thinking, can do. Like I'll use us as an example. So like Atrium, Atrium's focus on helping people use data to improve the performance of their reps and their teams and so on and so forth. And so, obviously you can use metrics for a variety of data-driven sales management use cases. If you're hiring shit tons of reps constantly because like Tiger Global dropped like $50 million into your company, and now you're supposed to like hire 10 sales reps like every 2 months, which of course is bananas. Well, obviously paying attention to their ramp is really important. That might have been a use case that we would really like harp on like last year or the year before. Versus if you have a more economically constrained environment, you can say, hey, efficiency is really important. Pipeline management is really important. if you have reps who have problematic win rates or problematic conversion rates, you want to be able to focus in on that and like fix them or offboard them if you can fix them. Moreover, if opportunities and leads are becoming very precious, well, it's really important for your reps not to be like, oh, well, like I'm just gonna ignore my pipeline and have like 20 untouched ops because like there's more where that came from. And so have you, and so like, you go to our homepage at atriumhq.com and you can actually see this. Like, I forget what our tagline used to be, but now it's like, tough times require amazing sales management and like, helping people be more efficient using data. It wasn't like a super complicated change. Like, what sort of perspective do you have around like, the tuning of messaging? You were talking about the humans that you might talk to, but like how you talk to them might change a little bit.
Yeah. 100%. The thing that look, everyone has to reorient. Yes, not only who you're targeting, but the messaging that you're delivering. And the thing that I'm forcing our companies to hone in on first, more than anything, is validating whether or not you're a must-have or a nice-to-have. Are you an aspirin or vitamin? Now, arguably, if you ask everybody inside your organization, you say, "Oh, we're absolutely a must-have. People can't live without us."
Of course.
Blah 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 blah. Yeah, quit drinking your own champagne and take a reality pill and go talk to your customers. And ask them, what would they do if you shut off your service? What would they do? What would be their options?
Right.
It's a really interesting question. It's almost like sometimes we're afraid to ask that because we don't want to know that they actually have options, but it's just the reality that they do. And one of the things we have to be really clear about is identifying where we are an aspirin and where in what markets or what segments are we considered.
Right, because it can be different.
It can be totally different. Right. We have some companies that are kind of vacillate on the line, and it's like, okay, well, you got to be really careful about the ones that could potentially, what you're going to see is you're going to see deal cycles get longer, discount rates get higher. You're going to see maybe push counts getting higher. And those to me are kind of like indicators that, okay, maybe that segment or maybe that market that we're going after doesn't really see us as a must have. And so first we have to understand, where do our customers see us? And then we need to double click into our messaging and go, okay, well, if we're considered a nice to have in some segments, can we reorient our messaging and focus on areas of the product that we believe are must have capabilities that we can validate with a customer?
Yep.
And then to our customers that are absolutely a must have, let's double down on that. The one thing everyone has to be cautious of is everyone is changing their messaging right now. Everyone's reorienting their messaging around, efficiency, do more with less, drive bigger ROI stories so that we can get you to spend money now. Just be really careful about that. It has to be real.
Yeah, it has to be real. It can't be bullshit.
Go talk to your customers and get it from them and say, listen, this is what they said.
Yeah, in their voice, in their words. Yeah.
It's so true. We don't do enough of it, especially early stage companies. When it's a frothy environment, you don't think about it, right? You're like, our customers are happy, yay! Net dollar retention's up, and our net promoter score is up. But when things start getting a little shifty, I highly recommend you double click on your customers to learn more about what value in their language you really provide, and what it would mean if you didn't exist.
Yeah, there's some good comments coming in here. Chris Leon noting that it's really important to talk to customers. I think I want to talk a little bit more about customer love and retention and what have you here in a second. And I think Wayne is exactly right that we always focus. The first three rules of startups is focus, 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 and that includes right, like the the ICP that you're working on, like ICP that you're focused on, like how narrow that can be, which of course like runs very counter to how a lot of founders or like product leaders might think about things and say like, oh well, like everybody can get utility out of my thing, versus like no, like what's the white hot center? So on the customer love front, I think that's something that we as sales professionals haven't historically done as good a job as we should. And I think it's part of that is just the reality of like, yeah, you sell a 2-year contract and it's like later your CS's problem, have fun. And like that's like not really the reality anymore. Like obviously Nick Mehta from Gainsight has really been like pounding this drum for a long time, like kind of out there by himself, like kind of like a one-man like marching band, just like, is anyone gonna follow this guy? And now I think everyone's like really getting it, where it's just like, yeah, as things become not uncontracted or usage based or month to month or or what have you, just making sure that your customers are continually getting utility is extremely important. And then even if you don't have that situation, right, even if you do sell annual contracts in an economically shifty environment, it's really important for you to be bird dogging that your folks are taking care of business and are using and having a lot of success. I know that you guys published something recently on retention and what have you. Just what are you sharing with the portfolio around customer love, customer retention, et cetera? And then maybe we can get that document dropped into the chat here.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we know that your customers are your most valuable asset. Well, arguably your employees are your most valuable asset. If you're Danny, what's his name? Danny Meyer from Shake Shack, right? Your employees are your most valuable asset. And then if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. Customers are crucial right now. Customer retention should arguably be the number one focus for founders and revenue leaders right now, because you can't afford to lose them. And they're also your best source of pipeline if you're actually really delivering value. But what you need to understand, and we wrote an article on, your playbook for retaining customers in an economic downturn. We'll share it with everybody. And it's basically kind of a framework, which is like identifying the value, your customers get from your products and want access, and then their business health, right? And that's those are two areas that you have to be really honest about. Is like, how healthy is their business? Is their business really struggling and they're not getting a ton of value? Well, you may have to just walk away from them or consider that you're likely going to lose them as customers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Or if they're getting a ton of value and their business is actually really healthy because they're selling into, insurance, then continue to reinforce it and support it. And those are likely the ones that you're going to be able to get even more revenue out of in terms of your pipeline or down the road, because they're happy customers, right? But in order to even do the evaluation, you have to actually talk to your customers and understand the value that you're delivering, plus the strength of their business, to be honest. And that just takes some work, takes some calories.
The strength of their business piece is interesting, right? And I think that's an important thing. It's just kind of like, hey, if you only look at customer health scores, and I'll talk about customer health scores here in a little bit, as relates to like how much of the product that they're using, how frequently they're using, et cetera, you might be like, oh man, these guys are like hunky dory, right? But if they're going to go out of business in 6 months or 12 months, or they're going to riff their sales team or whatever, they could be using the heck out of your product all day long. And actually, we've had some of this with Atrium. We have customers who are just like, so like, you look at their usage and it's just like hitting the cover off the ball, and you're like, oh man, like you guys are like kicking ass, and we're going to do case studies with you, et cetera. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, just kidding, we weren't able to get our next round of funding. It's like, Now the good news, one thing that's, so like that sucks. Now I think a really important thing that organizations don't do as good of a job as they should on is, we talk about this on our sales team all the time, is like the lifetime value of the contact versus the account. Like, God bless the account, love it. You want it, like, they're where the budget's coming from, but the people in the account, right? Like that VP of sales, that director of sales development, that AE manager, whatever, they're the ones who are getting they're getting, paid because their team is more successful, or like they're getting promoted. So even if that organization like goes away or there's a riff or whatever, you got to make sure to follow those people, right? And make sure, like, because if you've gotten them to success. So I think that's something that is like a way of, even if you have some of those like shortfalls, you can kind of like jump back and like kind of retain. Like, we actually see this a little bit where like you'll have 4 sales leaders in an organization all using Atrium, and then maybe the organization like churns for whatever reason. We saw this with COVID, and then those folks like go land in 4 other sales organizations that all buy. It's kind of a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have.
But anyway, like it's a silver lining, right? And I think and when you think about the measuring of the health of the customer, and like talking to the customer, what are some ways that you would recommend folks do a good job of doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, that's it. That's interesting. Like, so there's public and private data that you want to look at to determine like, where their business stands. You kind of need to look at kind of some of the macro trends of what's happening in that industry in particular. Like, is that industry being impacted positively or negatively overall? Because that's going to trickle down that company. Even one of those things like, if you sell into venture-backed companies, you can do some rough cash estimates on kind of cash runway by looking at
based on the last time they Crunchbase,
pulling the head count on LinkedIn and assume a burn of 10 to 20K per employee per month, and you can start to get a sense of like, okay, well then they're pretty solid. They've got enough cash for 18, 20 months, so they're okay.
Versus like they last fundraised like 24 months ago and nothing's been announced.
Oh, yep. Absolutely. By the way, anybody looking for jobs, these are the things that I also recommend. It's like, look, make sure they've got that in the bank and that they're funded, they've got great backers. And I think the other thing is just don't be afraid to ask them, how is the current economic environment impacting your business, right? How's it impacting your business metrics? Here are the things that we're seeing or hearing from your peers based on conversations we've had. Curious as to how that really resonates and lands with you. Oh no, it's fine. We've got a ton of cash in the bank. We're operating really efficiently, so we're good. We're gonna have to. Look, at the end of the day, even businesses that are, efficient are going to do some element of consolidation. It's going to happen, and you kind of want to make sure that you're not one of those things that's being consolidated, right? And I feel like at least in the sales tech space, there's a lot of that's going to happen.
For sure. One thing on the thing about fundraising or kind of most recent fundraise, one of the things that we've actually had our SDR teams starting to do is we have like a concept called new op creation notes. It's got like a template that kind of like characterizes a bunch of information. The AEs use it, it's like a large field on the op. It gets fired out via like troops into Slack and like an email automation, whatever. And so we've got this template that gets populated. And then one of the things that we added was last fundraise, right? Amount of last fundraise. Yeah, amount of last fundraise and last fundraise date. So that way, like the account executive going into it, it's just like one less thing that they have to do in pre-call planning. Like it's just sitting right there and in the new op creation notes there.
That's super smart. I like that.
Yeah. The we're all about process here. No way, Jose. But yeah, let's talk. So on the prospecting, kind of like pipeline generation front, et cetera, are there kind of like things that you've been observing changing in in the portfolio as relates to how they're spending with respect to marketing, the expectations that folks have with respect to AE pipeline contribution, how much they're investing in SDR teams, et cetera.
Yeah. So those are really interesting points. I think the first thing it starts with is getting our founders and CEOs way more maniacally focused on pipeline. Pipeline is so critical right now because look, at the end of the day, we're already seeing this. It's just happened over the last couple of months, but deals are taking longer, right? Deal sizes are coming down kind of across the board, right? And the reality is pipeline is disappearing. It's just people are pushing back and saying, look, this is no longer a priority. We've got budget cuts. We need to stave this for, who knows how long, 6, 9 months, 12 months, who knows,
whatever it is.
And so what's happening is like all that juicy pipeline that you had to get through your quarterly number is like getting cut by a factor of 30-40% right now. And so it's really, really important as leaders to make sure that your deal strategy and deal analysis is you kind of need to double down on it and really truly understand, is this a real deal? And why, and what problem are we really solving for them? And is this a must-have, must-solve problem now, or is this something that they can wait 3, 6, 9 months? It's the whole like, how do you create urgency? But from a pipeline perspective, it's really unfortunately, marketing generated pipeline is down pretty significantly, probably 30-40%, kind of across the board. So we're forced to do more outbound, to be more strategic in our outbound, to be more tactical in our messaging, as we were talking about before. But at the end of the day, I think it's a daily regimen that leaders have to be assessing the health of their pipeline on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're observing, and this is even the case in our team as well, is like Atrium has like a very solid kind of like mid-market sales motion. It's like, if it's very similar to like SalesLoft's motion or what have you. Like we don't, I mean, we have some customers that are in the like many hundreds of sales sellers realm, but it's more in the kind of like 10 to like 200 or 300 sellers. And so like typically that's been, like a 45 or like 60-day sales cycle, whatever, with like a 10 to 15K land, and then that expands up over time to like 25 or like 35 or whatever as we kind of spider across the rest of the organization. So as a result, like our AEs would be on like 15 to 20 customer facing meetings a week, et cetera, like definitely like trotting, right? And so as things have like kind of slowed down a little bit there, you have 10 customer facing meetings in the week. That's great, right? Like you like we only have is like 40 or 50 hours in the in the week. And so what we've done is like we've redirected some of that time, not all that time, but like a few hours a week to enable AE prospecting. Obviously starting with like the most juicy stuff. Like, so just recently we made sure it's like it was a marketing project to make sure that we could assign a couple hundred like solid ass ICP accounts per AE, make sure that there was like 5 fresh contacts that were like solid in there, right? I don't want the AEs like fiddling around on LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I mean, I don't want SDRs fiddling around on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, right? I want them actually like executing, right? But like, so that was one thing. The other thing too is just making sure that we have a really good process in place for like close loss op recycling. So op close loss, especially with Atrium, because like one of the things that's cool with Atrium is like it takes like 3 or 4 minutes to set up an Atrium account. So what'll happen is organization, like we sell on customer data. So someone will turn on an Atrium account, like an SDR manager or AE manager or director of SDR or AE or whatever. And usually we have like a 50% win rate from when organizations turn on an account, because they're like, oh man, this is like showing me stuff that I didn't even like know. Great. But then for the other ones that close loss, like you have an account set up still, right? And so then like looping back again in like 60 days or 90 days or whatever ends up being a really important thing to do.
Super smart.
If you do it, right? And so like, like close lost, like resurrecting close lost ops is like an example of something that's like really good low hanging fruit where the timing was off like 3 months ago or 6 months ago or whatever. And so like, if you're pivoting AEs to doing some of their own prospecting, make sure that that's like a good lead source that's like piping into them.
100%. I'm curious, how are you ensuring? Because oftentimes when it goes close loss, it just, AEs just kind of forget about it. Like, oh, close loss, it's wiped out. How are you rerouting those kind of back to them and kind of putting them up in their tickler? Because that's part of the problem, right? Is the process of like, oh, it's gone. So I'm just focusing on whatever's in front of me right now.
Yeah, we have a monthly recurring meeting. Like there's just a report on it where there's like a Salesforce report for close lost ops where like the close date is greater than 60 days ago, but less than like 120. So it's like essentially you got this like moving window constantly. Sorry. And then there's a roll-up field on the account of, is there an open op right now? So is it like we use roll-up helper to put an integer on the account that says, is there an open op right now? And so that report essentially is, here's all the closed lost ops from 60 to 120 days ago. Sure. If it doesn't have an open op because of that roll-up field on the account, keep it in this report. And then the AEs see, and then we have a meeting where we go through it, and then the AEs are like, oh yeah, I should go attack that. And then that becomes an action item. Right. And then of course, like the next meeting, it's like, cool. Like if that thing is still in that report because there's no new open op, totally. It's just like, cool, what happened there? Like, why is there not a new op open? And then eventually it just kind of like falls out like the end of the 120 days. And then like that goes off to like SDR land for resurrection.
Yeah, totally. Wayne, you're totally spot on. Closed lost ops is such a great place for new reps to go spend some time, because they get to learn a ton,
good point.
But also, it's a great opportunity for new folks. I dig that.
So Doug, you spent a lot of time in sales productivity, enablement, et cetera. When you think about like the importance of getting reps as efficient as possible, so like maybe maybe last year, the year before that, it would be like, okay, if 50% of your reps were hitting quota or not, because like, hey, look, even if this person, I know, but like, yeah, it's like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, like, look, if like capital is free and you're essentially saying like, oh, okay, this seller cost me 120K a year, 140K a year, and they're adding like, I don't know, like 200K of ARR or like 300K of ARR, like very inefficient, not great, et cetera, but they're still adding ARR,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like that's the old, that's like the old, right? That's the well, that's the old mindset, right?
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden it's like, no, like we want to see a 4x, a 4x productivity number, a 5x productivity number. What are the steps that are helpful to kind of like help managers or leaders or what have you, like tighten that up coming out of a very loosey-goosey kind of managerial environment?
Whew, man, that's a really interesting question. And the part of it is the question is does your organization even have enablement? Because it's largely one of those functions that gets let go, when the fat is being trimmed, unfortunately. And unfortunately, what we're also seeing even in this environment is when cuts are being made, they're largely being made more on the go-to-market kind of HR operations side of the business, much less so on the product and engineering side, of course, because you need your product to continue to go sell. So,
right.
So, at the end of the day, maybe you're getting rid of some of those bottom performers that weren't really able to cover their costs. But arguably, the way I think about when it comes to enablement, one of my biggest challenges is, and I was just having this conversation with Stephanie Middlesbrough about this, is just this idea of like so many people out there they don't know what it means to be strategic in the world of sales enablement. And in order to be strategic, in order to be the value add to your sales leader and your CEO, you need to have a metrics driven mindset instead of a program management driven mindset. And so It starts with, okay, your two numbers that you should care the most about, that you should be measured against, is revenue and net dollar retention, just like all go-to-market leaders. Underneath that, you've got an attainment target, which is based on your financial model, right? So you built a financial model based on 75, 80, 72, whatever it may be, percent of your reps actually hitting quota. That's coming down, of course, right now, as we know, as numbers are being adjusted in some cases, not in all cases. It's important for you to know and understand that so you can track and see how are you trending? Are you trending towards that target, or are you way off? And then the next metric that you have to pay attention to is rep productivity. And so if you're way off on your attainment target, then how much are you getting from an output per rep month over month? And of course, it's going to fluctuate because you're going to have big months and slower months. And then after that, you need to break it down into the sales equation, right? Which is, okay, what's the baseline for every segment that we have for, pipeline times win rate times deal size divided by your sales cycle. And you need to have your benchmarks for all of your segments. And if you don't have those, then what are you measuring them against? You're just measuring them against activity. Like, what are you doing? How do you know where to turn the dials or how to turn the dials to determine whether or not you can help your 70% of your reps get to their number, right? So the way I think about it is like, let's start with the metrics and work our way down and use those to help drive where we should focus and double down, right? So right now, to your point, we're recommending all of our companies that need AEs need to spend more time prospecting and building pipeline and real pipeline, right? AEs need to spend more time on deal health and really truly understanding if it's a real deal or not. Right. I'm less worried about kind of downstream, discounts, negotiations. That's going to be a little bit more tricky because more people are being involved in the buying decision. More people are pushing for discounts because of the economic environment, right? So do we know how to handle that? Our deal size is coming down because we're getting so much pushback in the negotiation. So when you start with the metrics, then you can start to look at, well, where are we struggling? And arguably too, the other, from an operational perspective, we want to look at process and go, where are we getting stuck? Time and stage, where are deals hanging? Where are they going to die? And the more analysis we can do on that, the better we can support the programs or the focus areas to drive kind of the efficiency in the organization.
Totally. Like historically, the way that a lot of organizations do kind of like enablement or like productivity initiatives or programs is very like pan organizational. They're like, hey, everybody's going to do more prospecting, or hey, we have an organization wide focus on I don't know, like raising ASPs, so like, you know,
right.
not discounting or what have you. That and I think one of the reasons why organizations have done that historically is because it was very difficult for them to get granular as to what was the specific improvement area for a given rep.
Yep.
Right? Like what's the, like you're a golfer, right? Like this person's swing is different than the hitch in this person's swing is different than the hitch in this person's swing is different than the hitch in that person's swing right there. But if you just like prescribe across like 20 golfers, like, hey, everybody's just gonna like, you know, really keep their arms straight or like really keep their head down or whatever, you might be like best case scenario, you're like just wasting a lot of that effort on people who don't have that problem, right?
Yep.
But the downside, of course, is like they definitely have another problem. And so this is where and this is something that like you know, our customers really focus on is, and are enabled, is like, you've got 6 reps as a sales manager, an AE manager, or like you've got, you know, 8 reps or 10 reps as an SDR manager, or what have you. Being able to identify the hitch and the swing of each person, right, and then remediate that is
Crucial.
like, that's ultimately the way that you're going to lift the performance of your team. Because like the performance of your team, like your bookings, you know, bookings performance, or your opportunity creation performance or whatever, is just the aggregation of those individuals, right? So if you've got, like, if you're looking across your portfolio of 8 account executives and you're like, okay, cool, like my team is hitting quota, it's great. It's like, well, actually, like these 2 over here, they're underperforming, right? They're being carried by like this guy, or this guy and this gal over here. So if we can fix these, like say there's like 3 down here, and if we can fix like 2 of them, like, oh, okay, you know, you've got this win rate problem and it really seems like it's coming from a conversion rate out of proposal. It's kind of weird that like your win rate, like your conversion rate out of proposal is so much lower than everybody else's. That tells me like stuff's getting down funnel that probably has no business being there. Let's go ahead and figure out like why that, like that seems like a discovery problem. Let's figure that out, right? Or alternatively, if we've got somebody who's got like a win rate problem, right, and it looks like it's the result of a pipeline hygiene problem, you have somebody who's got like, they're falling out of touch with their opportunities, they don't have good rigor. Well, we can remediate that in a very different way than the first person. Or if we can't remediate that, then we just have to term that person, right? Totally. Because like if you're not an adult and you can't manage your inbox and you can't manage your calendar, like, I'm sorry, like you can go off and like do something else, but like we're mid-market SaaS sellers here, like we're professionals, like we need to manage our pipeline. And if you can't hang there, like I'm going to give your opportunities to somebody else, right? And like I'm going to raise everybody else's attainment without you, right? And so like, totally. You know, being able to identify that is, and like have an honest conversation with yourself. And then oftentimes what we see is that gives managers and leadership backbone to have an honest conversation with underperforming reps. And it just makes everything work better in that regard.
I totally agree. I mean, what you're, you know, it's the anti-peanut butter approach, basically, right? Which unfortunately, now, by the way, that's a heck of a lot easier when you're smaller and you have a team of 6, 8, 10, right? Yep. When you've got 40, 50, 100, like, wow, okay, how do we do this in an individual level? And that's why I say, you know, if you're in sales enablement or even RevOps, that's how you be strategic. Is you help each individual manager identify by rep, right, how they're doing.
No, that's why an enablement person can't do like bespoke coaching for everyone. That's the fucking manager's job, right? I know. Like, and so like the leverage there is, sorry to get animated, but like it drives me insane that organizations, like enablement people, are not allowed, like they're looked at as like glorified sales trainers as opposed to enabling the managers. So like once you enable a manager, now you got leverage across 8 reps, right? And versus just like, you know, shut up sales trainer, your job is onboarding, versus like, no, let's teach our managers how to have like a good one-on-one, right? And and then hold them accountable to it. Like, oh, we're not like, no, sorry, your one-on-ones is not for just like talking about like whatever deals are top of mind. Like, sorry, that's not how this works. Like, here's the agenda, And like, here's, and like, you're going to look, and these are the set of metrics that you're going to be looking at. Like we have this big customer called Grin, who are absolutely fantastic. They do scaled like influencer marketing management, and their RevOps team is rad. And they're implementing this like very rigorous, like structured one-on-one program. They have like 80 SDRs that just, it has like a very standard template. It has like a bunch of like links to various atrium assets and what have you. And they're just like, hey, managers, like this is the thing that like, not only are you going to use this to hold your reps accountable, we're going to hold you accountable to using this process, right? And so like, that's a scalable program.
That, and you know, it's interesting is somebody added like, hey, okay, how do you train the managers how to coach? And yeah, training your managers how to coach, I think is really critical. But part of it is you need to guide them as to what they should be coaching against, right? And this is why, you know, when I think about the sales equation, it's like, great. So Pete, you know, in order to get to your number, you know, we need 3x pipeline on a rolling month-over-month basis. You've consistently been about, you know, 1.5x, and that's largely impacting your ability to actually get to your number because you just don't have enough at bats. Like your win rate's fine, your ASP is maybe a little light, but if we can focus on pipeline, so let's unpack your strategy for pipeline. What do you do? Walk me through your cadences. Walk me through the emails that you're sending. Walk me through the first call conversations you're having initially with your customers. Like that's how you actually do individual coaching, but you need something to anchor it around. Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges that managers often miss is like, they just think broadly, oh, you've got your number and you've got activities. It's like, oh, okay.
Versus like where's the hitch? Where's the hitch? Yeah, where's the hitch in the giddy up? Hey Asa, I'll see you in 2 weeks at when I'm in Atlanta. Yeah, I mean Asa talks about this exactly right. Like, especially if you think about like where managers come from, they come from being AEs, they come from being SDRs or what have you. So it oftentimes is like very like it's hard if you're a 26-year-old or a 28-year-old or like a 30-year-old like AE man, like first time AE manager or SDR manager or what have you. Especially like if you used to be peers with these people or whatever, like. It's kind of like the mindset of like, oh, like, who am I? I'm just like little old me. Like, you know, where do I have the standing to be like, hey man, like, I'm feeling XYZ. Like, this is where data can be really helpful. And because it helps with that backbone component, which is like, hey man, it's not because I'm an asshole, you know, maybe I am. But like, I'm looking right here and this is showing us that like, I see that you have this many untouched ops as compared to your peers. Like, I'm not making this up. This is not me being the heavy, right? Or alternatively, like, hey man, in the trailing 30 days, like your first meeting volume, like look at that as compared to like the other 30 mid-market AEs in this account, or sorry, in our organization. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, if you're telling me a story about how like you're going to be able to attain at the same level of these other folks right here with that level of activity, I'd love to understand how that's going to happen, because then I'd get everybody else as efficient as you. But like, but I'm dubious there.
By the way, I've got a suggestion that I recommend to all of our sales leaders across our portfolio. Look, to give you some credibility or some confidence, or maybe even a little bit of a platform to have the courage to have those difficult conversations, even especially if you were a peer and now all of a sudden you're a manager. You need to create a kind of a mission and vision for your sales organization. What are the values that you stand on? So what's our mission? What's our vision? And what are our core values? And honestly, you need to create that for the organization, get everybody involved, and have everyone sign it. Because I value hygiene. Like, I value data hygiene. And if you're signed off, and if that's one of our core values and you signed off on it and you're not managing the data.
You said it. It's not me. I'm holding you accountable.
I'm holding you accountable. My job is to hold you accountable, not to tell you what to do, because we all agreed what matters to us, what's important to us. And it's so like, and as a team member, I want a sense of purpose. Like, why are we all doing this together? Otherwise, we create a bunch of like individual lone rangers that are just doing their own shit. And you're picking, and you're going to nitpick every single person in different ways. And it's just uncomfortable. But if you create some consistency around your mission and your values as an organization, it gives you so much more. It just gives you a better, stronger platform to stand on and to call out certain behaviors that may not be in line with what's working.
And what it does too is it actually, it's a really great point. And I'm a huge fan of like systems coaches to like Greg Popovich, and like, one of my favorite books is The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, who obviously was a big systems coach at Stanford and the 49ers and what have you, even like Belichick and what have you. But like what ends up happening is if you have that like cultural mores there, not only do you have now like the manager and leadership have like enforcement and kind of compliance like backbone, you also get more pure enforcement as well.
Totally.
Where it's like, hey man, like that's not how we run that play. Like, come on, we all know, right? And then you have like leadership from the side. Like you have like leadership from the side going on. One book that I absolutely love on for kind of like new managers is Corey Bray's 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. We actually have we've given away like thousands of them. In fact, I actually just dropped a link if anybody wants to sign up for a couple of books and one of our Atrium Coffees for Closers Yetis. You can grab that there. But so Corey Bray's 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach is absolutely fantastic for it's written as a story, as a narrative. It's really great around kind of like sales coaching and what have you. And then there's Michelle Vazana's Crushing Quota, which is like a more data-driven management book. And then of course there's John McMahon's Qualified Sales Leader, which is just like an absolutely fantastic kind of like, war stories, et cetera, book as well. But yeah, like I think helping managers coach is something that that organizations could do a much better job of. Obviously, we care about it very much from a data standpoint, but one of the other things too is that like there's just not as much like training that goes on there, like teaching sales managers like actually how to manage, how to have tough conversations.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Even Wayne highlighted the fact that he was the top rep that became manager, and he's like, he didn't know how to get access to the data or what data to pay attention to, right? Because as a rep, you pay attention to very different data as you pay attention to as a manager. Right. So different. And nobody tells you, nobody kind of teaches, no one gives you like, here's the playbook of all the shit that you need. That's why I'm a big fan of like, start with revenue, net dollar retention, attainment, rep productivity, sales equation. That's a great place to start. And then of course, the activity metrics underneath that. And Jim, to your question about, email templates and how the reps send them and should they be created by RevOps? And of course you're going to have templates that are created by your enablement team or your SDR leader, or even your sales leader that works, but they need to be customized. There's no effing way you're sending one template out to absolutely everybody. If you are,
it's gonna be bad in a hurry. But but you want to have what is the thing that Jeremy Donovan what is it called? Customization at scale, or sorry, personalization at scale. So what you want to be able to do is allow it to be. You want to be able to like have sections in there. It's like, hey, here's the blessed template, and then here's the section that like you're responsible for, Mr. SDR, Ms. SDR. The one thing I was going to note really quickly is one of the ways that we've been kind of trying to help with like that managerial kind of competency gap is we actually have there's a gentleman named Richard Harris who is a fantastic
nice
sales trainer. Yeah. Well, like literally
before you said that, she posted the link to the boot camp. I was like, nice. Dude, that's a good 1-2 punch.
Yeah. So the reason why we did this is because obviously at Atrium, we're super focused on helping managers have the relevant data. But then if you have a manager who's like uncomfortable having like a performance conversation with their reps, like all the data in the world is like not super helpful if you're afraid to hold somebody accountable to like pipeline hygiene or activity or fill in the blank. And so what we realized was that we actually had a bunch of customers who were like asking our customer success people like, okay, well, like, can you help me structure like a performance conversation or what have you? And we're like, okay, well, like our CSM, we have like a bunch of documents on it or whatever, but like our CSMs are not really for that. They're for helping people like use Atrium more successfully, interpret the data, make sure it's set up appropriately, et cetera, et cetera. So we're like, you know what? We should just like sponsor a recurring boot camp on this. And so we just have it like monthly, and people come out of it. It's like super cathartic because they're just like, oh man, I wish I had like taken this like a year ago or 24 months ago, because like I'm afraid of having these I'm afraid of having these kind of conversations with my reps because no one ever taught me how to, right?
Yep, totally. Love it. It's interesting. Some of these basic conversations that we're talking about with data and metrics and leadership and management and coaching, all of that. One of the things that I find really interesting too is from a pipeline perspective, especially with your SDRs. I think it's really wild how they're so focused on booking meetings, whereas oftentimes in the cadences of outreach that we're doing to prospects, many times you should be just reaching out to share information, to nurture a relationship, to develop, and it's not to book a meeting. And the problem is, and part of the reason why, and I always suggest to our portfolio companies, hey, look, track the number of activities per contact within an account. Like, how often are you reaching out to that contact, and how many contacts per account are you actually reaching out to? And what do you do if an SDR has a meaningful conversation with somebody who's maybe an assistant at the organization or is the chief of staff, but they're not going to take a meeting with the AE? Do they get penalized for it? Oftentimes they do, because your incentive structure is like meetings booked, meetings held, revenue closed, right? And we don't do enough to actually give them credit for meaningful interactions, and however you define that. I think it's something that we need to continue to evaluate, because it takes 8 to 10 touches in order to get somebody to respond, and there's 8 to 10 people involved in any deal over $10,000, and so there's a lot of activity in one account. It's not all going to translate into meetings.
Yeah, or it won't in the short term. It will eventually, right? So what ends up happening?
Of course.
Yeah, it's one of the things. Well, but like that's the problem though. Is like if you create that incentive structure, or at least you don't at least coach on it. Like I'll give you an example. So SDR teams are usually more data driven than AE teams for sure. But even then, if you're only looking like opportunity creation, then total activity volume, you're missing a bunch of things in between. Like as an example, one of the things that our customers pay a lot of attention to is not just like how many unique contacts or how many accounts a given SDR or an SDR team is engaging with, but also how many net new contacts and net new accounts that they're engaging for the first time.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. So like a sales loft, they call them like day ones or whatever. Essentially, it's like new opportunity inflow for an AE, because like you need it to constantly be flowing through, right? And then use our SDR team as an example. I think they're gold on 50 net new contacts a day that they're engaging for the first time. And then it ends up being like in aggregate, like a couple hundred activities or whatever. And then you have a bunch of efficiency metrics as well, as like email response rates, connect rates, et cetera. And so like, if you have that like harness, then what ends up happening is you kind of can see where the shortfall is. Like, oh, your activity levels are really high, no new contact inflow. So you're just like beating a bunch of dead horses. No bueno, right? Or calling
a bunch of fax machines like we used to do at Oracle when we were SDRs.
Right, no bueno. Well, look at all this activity. Oh, nothing's coming out, right? Or alternatively, like, oh man, you're doing a bunch of activity, but your email responsiveness rate is poo-poo. Why is that? Oh, your contact selection is better. Oh, you're not using the blessed, you're not using the blessed sequences and cadences and what have you. And so this is why it's important. You can't just have like 2 KPIs and be like, okay, I'm done. It has to be more holistic. Now, it doesn't have to be like dozens and dozens and like you get lost in the sauce, but like it has to be like a couple of things in order to be like, oh, okay, Doug, the reason why your swing is off right now is because of this thing right here, which is different than this thing over here. And so I think that's like a new muscle for a lot of managers. And it's coming, right? But it's going to take like a few years, for us to get there. So, Well, Doug, do you have any parting thoughts? Because we're up on time here, and I know we don't want to keep you from the golf course.
I'm at the golf course, but I'm not going to play golf. Well, later this afternoon.
How about this? I give you permission to go play hooky. Clear your calendar. Clear your calendar.
I can't do it.
Bummer.
The thing that I will say, I've got an article coming out next week. It's a 2-part series on pipeline. It's specifically more for founders, but even revenue leaders, because I address pipeline, what it is, how to assess it, how to think about it from a sales leader's perspective. not from a marketer's perspective. And one of my pains in the world of go-to-market is how marketers are just purely focused on top of the funnel, and they're not actually focused all the way through to
MQLs.
Yeah, like I don't give a shit about it. You give me 10,000 MQLs, I don't care. I'd rather have 100 that are perfect, that are perfect ICP fit that we can actually that are ready to engage. So I've got that coming out next week. That's all I got.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Next week, we have John Scherer, who's the VP of Sales at Lattice. He's absolutely fantastic. Week after that, we're going to have Todd Capone, who is the author.
Boy, Todd.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's got a new book coming out. Obviously, there's the Transparency Sale. Now he has the Transparency Sales Leader, which I'm super pumped about because apparently I have a copy coming in the mail. So he's going to be in 2 weeks. Yes, we'll compare notes. Doug, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it. Any parting thoughts?
Well, it's funny. Speaking of Todd, he's a sales historian, which is amazing. And did you know that
student of the game.
Up until 1960, sales was actually taught at every college and university around the country?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Did you know that? And then all of a sudden the 60s came and they're like, no, free will, free love, whatever it is. And off they go. Everything went off the rails.
All right, and now we're bringing it back. Cool, man. All right, well, have a good rest of your day and enjoy the golf course when you do get out there. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Later.
See you, man.